Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you turn to page 3 in your warrant booklets, the first article requires no action tonight. That's the election of officers, and a slate of candidates will be prepared and presented by the board town meeting. Article 2 was the substance of our review several weeks ago. No vote required on Article 2, which was the annual budget. Article 3 is the electric division budget. We did have a presentation on that budget as well as their capital plan at the last meeting. However, no vote was taken, so there is a vote required tonight, not to approve, but to advance this budget on to town meeting.
Great. Any questions, Mike?
Nope.
Paul?
No.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Well, just one, so we don't approve their budget, we pass it on to the town meeting?
You voted forward to the town meeting. Yep.
We vote to forward it to town meeting?
Correct.
And I'm just trying to remember, why is it treated differently?
So under the law, the municipal light board sets the budget.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I think what the town meeting has always done is that basically the town meeting approves to allow the municipal light division to spend the proceeds that come in for the sale of electricity. So that's basically what we approve.
Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 4, the Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical High School District Assessment. We have our representative, Wayne Marquis, and the superintendent, Dr. Riccio. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Would you like to go to the microphone and discuss your budget, please?
Thank you. This is a team effort. Marisa Morowski, who is our school business administrator, works very closely to make sure that assessments are accurate and funding is accurate. Bills are paid in a timely manner and approved in accordance to procurement laws. And then obviously you all know Mr. Wayne Marquis, who is a staunch supporter of both Danvers and Essex North Shore. So we handed out a couple of booklets, the budget booklet that is given to each of our communities, but then in addition to that, you have 2 handouts. The first handout being what we call how the formula is, because I know that that typically is a question that is asked. How do we create the formula for the budget? And that is done through minimum assessments. So it looks like this. It's a color-coded. And this can be very helpful when you're determining how we determine our budget as well as the state. The second packet or information that you have is the Finance Committee packet related to our budget. Our budget increase overall from last year was 4.5%, which really mirrors what our enrollment increase is over a consistent enrollment increase to maximize our maximum enrollment data. As you see, there has been an enrollment increase since we opened in 2014, which has been consistent with what the expectations are, not only for the state and Governor Baker's initiative in maximizing career and technical education for all students in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but also maximizing our student population in a gradual, progressive manner. So in 2022, we will have reached our maximum capacity. The overall assessment budget, which is also in your packet for Danvers, has increased by 0.1%. So I believe it's an $18 increase over last year's assessment. And that has been done significantly through grant receiving of grants, competitive grants. We have received to date $3.4 million worth of competitive grant funding. That we do have a grant writer who is a retired curriculum director, but it really is a whole school effort. So we have a lot of people writing competitive grants, which help us reduce assessments. We have also increased our revenues, and those revenues include not only our out-of-district student population, so those students that have access to agricultural education, which is approximately 350 from 38 communities outside of our 17 sending communities, In addition to that, we have a partnership with the Sheriff's Department, and they are renting a portion of our space in Gallant Hall. We also have a relationship with North Shore Community College, and they have their culinary arts program as well as their cosmetology program housed at our facility. In addition to that, we have increased our adult education offerings, and some of the data that you have requested was sent last Thursday to Town Manager Steve Barther. I hope that you were able to receive that data that was requested. There are a lot of links to that data, so certainly I hope you were able to kind of digest it. But a lot of this assessment, or the low assessment increase, which is that 0.1%, $18, really is a result of everybody working together to make sure that we're writing competitive grants. We're really managing our funds appropriately and fiscally responsible, as well as adult education offerings. If there are questions, I guess, at this time.
Sally?
Thank you. One thing I'm just trying to understand, as you say and as your chart suggests, the increase to Danvers, I guess it's a per pupil increase is 0.1%, but the increase in our assessment, in our budget, is over 14%.
Which is directly indicated by the enrollment data.
So the budget, the chart you gave us for FY 2022 preliminary assessments shows 201 Danvers students, and that's an increase over last year?
That is correct. The mic just cut out.
That was my major question for
Okay.
now. Thanks, CR.
Thank you. Eric?
Thank you. So it's a lot certainly to digest. What is the actual number of the 22 capacity max? You said in 22 you'll hit your maximum capacity?
Yes, so it's approximately 1,600 students, which is our maximum capacity.
Certainly. And I'm just going to reference, so in reading the newspaper, it references a partnership that you had with Swampscott and I guess some other schools. Does that help you provide vocational education outside of that max, or is that inclusive of that max?
That is correct. So our maximum capacity is 1,600 full-time students, because really the enrollment is driven also by the classrooms that we have. So we
Sure.
are actually academic classroom. We have maxed our capacity for academic classroom enrollment. However, there are program areas that have availability in their CTE program areas because of the number of students that are on cooperative education job sites, as well as the size or the volume of that particular program area. Many of our kids are working at either Habitat for Humanity or off-site projects as well as their cooperative education placement area, which allows an increased opportunity for students that maybe didn't get into Essex Tech on the first round, or kids that didn't think that they wanted vocational education maybe until they're in their 11th grade. So we have engaged in partnerships with some sending communities.
Is that something that you are looking to expand, or what you have makes the most sense currently?
Well, as you know, Governor Baker has really stressed, and I think even Danvers is receiving some innovation pathways to be able to offer some courses as it relates to career and technical education. So really the goal is to educate all students that would want some sort of career training. So we would like to maximize, but we did start out very slowly 3 years ago with a partnership with Gloucester Public Schools. Last year we expanded with Peabody and Salem in Gloucester. This year we expanded into Beverly, and a lot of it was driven by the superintendents who reached out to us seeking some partnerships, because there are some kids that are sitting in high schools, as we all know, that would really thrive at a vocational school. And so what we're looking at is those construction trade program areas where kids can either have access directly into a union, like the laborers union, IBEW, et cetera, and get not only job placement within those unions or those trade areas, but then come back to Essex Tech at night for their trade training at night.
Thank you. And then just my other question is, if you have any thoughts around how the proposed admissions conversation is going to impact Essex. I mean, obviously it's proposed, but I'm sure you've given it some initial thoughts.
We're actually excited about it because I will say, I mean, Steve Barther and I have had some great conversations just about admissions just related to Danvers. But in addition to that, our school has been working with the state as it relates to admissions for about 3 years now. And the reason is clearly the school wasn't built for the capacity that people really need it to be built for in the communities that we serve. And career and technical education, as we know, research-based, any sort of applied learning can really be helpful as it relates to their math and core subject areas. So we have been working on admissions, and that is why some of the partnerships have formed. So the partnerships that formed were first in cities like Gloucester, Peabody, and Salem being the two gateway cities that really could thrive or need some sort of career training, possibly to change the pathway of some of their lives. But we're also working with the state with a, what we call a newcomers program. It's something that's really just in conversation purposes, but that would be a pipeline for students that are new to the country, may not have understood what career and technical education is and may not have applied for it. So yes, we are actually excited about the admissions. Look, I don't know that I think some of the processes will change, meaning looking at the attendance, et cetera, but really it's about how do we make sure that the kids that come to us are reflective of the communities that we serve. And so we're very proud, and I know it probably doesn't sound like a lot, but we are now at over 20% of non-white students, and that's something that has taken 3 years to get to, because as you know, we serve 17 sending communities. There are 2 gateway cities, but the other 15 communities are primarily white. And so we are really looking at diversifying our staff as well as our student populations.
Thank you.
Mike?
Under Instruction 2000, there's a substantial increase for security, 126,428, I think it is.
Yes.
66.75% increase. Can you tell me what?
Absolutely. So we actually had a contracted security, a private, it was called Merrimack Valley Guard Services, I believe. And through observations over the last couple of years, we felt as though that having our own staff of security would be in our best interest because, one, they have a vested interest in our school population. So it really is a transfer from a contracted services line to a operational line with our staff. So we have been able to hire our own staff security as opposed to having it contracted out.
Okay. And under the other one is also 55 point total school security. That matches just about the same thing you said. Total professional development. That's gone up another 125,000.
Yes, so last year we actually removed professional development out of the budget, and our CTE, so as you know, we have vocational and academic teachers. So we have 25 vocational programs that in order to get recertified, they have to have professional development not only in the pedagogy or pedagogical skills, but also in their trade areas. So we need to be able to offer. So what we did is we always had $400 to $500 per vocational teacher that was able to access professional development within their trade area. And that was just part of the operational budget. Last year, as part of the reduction in our budget, the teachers all agreed to remove that professional development line item. So it just went back.
All right. I did a small study based on your Danvers CTE enrollment. It looks like if you try to figure which of these courses are college versus which are the trades, I've got 201 Danvers students, and I came up with a couple of figures. About 70 would be rooted toward college, supposedly, and 131 for the trades, which would be about a 34.8% versus a 65.2%. Does that match anything that you people are striving for, or is it less or more?
It's actually pretty close. So 75, technically, if you were to look at all of our 25 programs, approximately 75% of our programs are 2 to 4 year college bound. But just when we look at the data and the data that was sent to you all, the 2 years also includes apprenticeships. So when a student graduates and enters an apprenticeship program, that is also considered a post-secondary. So yes, that is typically reflective of what our programs are, but also the student population.
Because there have been a couple of articles that are critical in the paper that we're not getting as many kids in trades that we should. And I believe North Shore Community is offering a free course for machinists, I believe.
At our school, yes. It's a,
Is that your
yep,
school?
It's at, yep. So we partner with North Shore Community College, plumbing, HVAC, electricity, construction and craft laborers, automotive technology, and advanced manufacturing. And those are all programs that are housed with our teachers, but through a partnership with North Shore Community College. And, health assisting as well.
And I notice you're fourth from the bottom as far as cost per pupil, which is good compared to all the schools that there are here. So, okay, I guess I'm all set. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Paul?
Thank you.
Well, I enjoyed the presentation. Most of my questions have already been asked, coming down the line here. But just to go back a little bit, you're talking about a $1,600 student enrollment, basically your max. So if you're involved with partnership students, and that would be from Salem, Beverly, and Gloucester at this point, correct? And Peabody.
And Peabody.
And Peabody. Now, how do those, then you come back and talk about 10th and 11th grade CTE programs? Is that correct? That
For the partnership programs or grade 11
is
and
that part of the partnerships? Is that all one together, not two separate programs?
Yeah, so grade 11 and 12
Right.
partnership programs.
Okay.
There are, yes.
So we're not looking at two separate types of programs. It's basically one program that includes 10th and 11th graders.
It's
Is that
11
correct?
and 12th graders.
10th, 11, and 12, yeah. Do you prefer to bring the students in and through the 10th grade? Is that easier for them to progress through 11th and 12th with the, if they're majoring in that particular programs that are under-enrolled?
Yeah, so keep in mind, any student that is a 9th grader currently from any of our sending communities can reapply to come into the 10th grade. We have a very similar admissions process. We interview all students. They can only gain acceptance into those programs that have available space. So, we cannot make space for them.
Yes.
The partnership programs, on the other hand, they have separate teachers for the most part that teach them. So there's only one program, which is automotive collision repair, that has the same teacher as a regular day student. The other partnership programs were paid for by a grant from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and they are paying tuition. So the kids go to their sending community in the morning, and then they come to us in the afternoon. And the reason why grade 11 was chosen is that typically in grade 9 and 10, your core subjects are done. So then in grade 11 and 12, you have more flexibility with the schedule, more flexibility with electives. And also their MCAS requirement is typically done as well. So it makes it a little bit easier to schedule in the 11th grade. Regulations, the Department of Education regulations, is that September of grade 11 is the threshold for any student entering a vocational school because of the number of hours that are obtained and obviously the loss of curriculum that happens.
So there is a point where you
Cannot take any.
Right, and so there is a separation point.
Yes, and the partnership kids come in every day, whereas recall the day students are every other week. So 1 week they have academics, the next week they have their shop class. The partnership kids have their academics every day, consistently half day, shop. So that's how they're able to also make up the time that they've lost in the 10th grade.
Does this opportunity still keep you within the 1,600 student limitation, or are you?
No, it's over the 1,600, but because there is space in those particular shop areas is how we're able to do it. We've actually maxed out academically speaking. So, the regular standard classroom, we really cannot add any additional academic students.
So when you get into the partnership programs, you're really teaching the trade, so to say, is that correct?
It's trade only, yes.
Right. The academic work has been done in 9th and 10th grade, pretty much.
Correct.
Okay. One last question. It looked to me like you sit pretty much holding your full-time employees to a minimum as far as increases. Is that correct? I didn't see much of an increase in...
Yeah, it's 2%, I believe, is what the contract was a 2% increase.
I'm not talking about the financial aspect of it. I'm talking about the
Oh, the staff
full-time employees,
population?
yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Has that been held pretty much level?
Yeah, we were able to do that. Last year, we actually went to the state and asked the state to re-look at the agricultural rate because our agricultural rate was actually less than what some of our sending communities were paying, which obviously did not make sense to us. So in addition to that, it's a lot more expensive to run an agricultural program because you have a whole farm crew, you have horse barns, animals, etc. So we did petition to the state for an increase in their agricultural rate, which did increase. So what that allowed us to do was we gained approximately $450,000. So we were able to move some of the salaries over to that area so that we did not have to put that kind of in our operational budget. It came out of tuitions.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thanks. Mike?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. We have Ted, I think hopefully being able to participate remotely. Ted, if you have any questions?
Can you hear me? You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Dr. Riccio, I just wanted to get, there's a lot of numbers that move around with respect to the budget and spending per student, and I just wanted to kind of walk through those with you a little bit. So the Essex number is fairly straightforward. I think this year the assessment to the town budget to the tax levy is $16,900 per student. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So a lot of times when we discuss this, and when I've seen it discussed in other meetings, we sort of walk down a path of average spending per student. And there's a lot of different types of students in Danvers public schools that aren't necessarily serviced by Essex Tech. There's special education programs and things like that. And then there's the whole issue of variable spending versus kind of fixed spending. And what's the best way for me to look at it? I've talked to the DPS folks, and when I ask them what the cost of educating sort of a quote unquote typical DHS student is, the variable cost, or I think as you guys term it, the level spending, it's $8,666 per student. So, and they ran the numbers too for Essex Tech, and the level spending per student at Essex Tech was $11,650. And obviously the assessment is higher because there's administrative and a whole list of reasonable fixed costs associated with running a high school. But if I'm just looking at it from an accounting standpoint, and I'm looking at managing a budget for a town where we hit the levy limit every single year, and we have OPEB liabilities and pension funding to catch up on, that have pretty much spoken for excess dollars from the town tax pool for the foreseeable future. Am I not correct in looking at pretty much every student that migrates from DHS to Essex Tech as being $8,000 in additional spending per head?
Just if I can ask for clarification, because the
Sure.
DHS number that you gave me was 80-something hundred, and
Yeah.
then the Essex Tech number that you gave me was 11,000 something. Is that accurate?
Yeah, 80, it was literally almost to the dollar, $3,000.
Okay, so then you're talking,
Yeah.
you're talking a $3,000 differential, is that the question?
Well, 3,000, but also, it's perhaps a discussion as part of the admissions policy, but also when a student migrates to Essex Tech, we get assessed overhead as well, right? So it's 16,000. Which is, I understand why that happens.
Yes.
But, we might, it's probably a different conversation on whether that should be part of the per student assessment or whether every town should be, whether that's part of a different formula. But if I'm just looking at it from an accounting standpoint, cash dollars impact to the budget, it seems to me like $8,000 per student per year is the number I should be working with.
So I actually don't have that in front of me, so I don't know that I
Okay.
can, I don't know that I can give you kind of an educated answer based on what you're saying, but what I can say is that on average, aside from the formula, on average, it's about $5,000 more per student to educate in a vocational setting as opposed to an academic setting. So if you were to look at, for example, a machine tool technology teacher typically will start his salary as a first-year teacher, $78,000 to $89,000 per year. And that is based on the trade experience that they have, as opposed to choosing to go, to Salem State University to get their education degree. They have worked in the industry. So, unfortunately, the salaries are also have to be comparable to what the industry is, and then also in order to attract. But, you're also looking at copper piping as opposed to loose leaf paper, or, so there's a lot of different costs that come into educating a vocational student. We are required by law to meet all standards as it relates to current industry standards. For example, one machine in the machine tool technology program is about $44,000 for one machine. If you have 20 students that are sitting at that one machine, not including the tools that go with that machine, which is another $20,000, and then you're paying on top of that twice a year for it to get maintained, by an outside contractor. So yeah, it definitely costs more to educate a vocational student, hands down.
Okay.
I can't argue with that at all.
All right. And I completely understand why. I'm just trying to, I feel like a lot of the conversation up frankly till basically now has been looking at average spending per student when we should be focusing on, purely in my seat on the finance committee, I should be looking at the cash impact to the town budget and looking at it that way. But everything you said makes sense. The second thing I wanted to ask about, so, I think I've been on the finance committee 4 years. Sierra could correct me if I'm wrong. And you were very transparent. You've been very transparent about increasing capacity at the school. But I don't ever think you guys sort of guided us to, effectively being on a run rate to double our Danvers population enrollment over a span of, 1, 4 or 5 year period. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I cannot speak for two former superintendents prior to me, because that would not be appropriate, but I can speak
Correct.
for myself. In my first year of presentation to the board, which was 2 years ago, but this is my third year as superintendent, I felt as though I was pretty clear is that the state is also asking us to maximize capacity as it relates to vocational education in the Commonwealth. So if there's an extra seat, if you read or if you watched the Board of Education meeting last week, they were pretty clear, Cliff Chung, who is the Associate Commissioner of Career and Technical Education, if there is a seat available at a vocational school, that student needs to have access to it. And so I believe that I was clear. I cannot speak again for prior administration because I think that that would not be appropriate. And certainly I would love to work, and I think we have been working with Steve Bartha on the admissions and how do we make sure that we're careful and really looking at it. And I would welcome all of you after COVID or, post when we can all kind of integrate together is to have a tour of our facility and really look at what the kids are doing on a daily basis. Because I think any way that we can expand our partnerships and relationships is really important to us as well.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate all that, but, I also see what the other educational investments that have been going on in Danvers. We just built a brand new elementary school. I believe there's at least a half dozen classrooms that could be staffed with teachers. I think we have capacity for extra teachers at our middle school. And we certainly have capacity at our high school given the decrease in enrollment over the last 5 years. And from my seat, it's, with all due respect to Charlie Baker and the Massachusetts Board of Education, my job is to focus on how to best to allocate the marginal educational dollar to impact the most number of students and children in Danvers. And right now, I feel like the relationship is you guys decide how much you need, and everything else gets split up with whatever you guys don't decide needs to go to the tech. And I know we can't solve that problem tonight, but I think if you look back over the last 4 years, I was much more I don't know. I've been watching for 4 years, and I think the increases, I certainly don't think the increases have been telegraphed to the rate that they've occurred. Maybe a pro rata increase with enrollment, but we're doubled, and capacity at Essex Tech is up 50%. And we've been investing in capacity in the rest of our school system to educate the rest of our children as well. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I appreciate.
Thanks, Ted. Just one question. A lot of people have talked about admissions tonight. Some time ago, I don't remember exactly when, I remember reading about the establishment of an admissions subcommittee. Can you just fill us in on what's been happening with that committee, who they've been meeting with and working with, and what's going? Obviously the state's doing some stuff, but what is Essex Tech doing about admissions, and what's this subcommittee doing?
Sure. So we instituted a subcommittee last year, but then really formalized it this year with our 5 largest sending communities, which includes Danvers, so Wayne is on the committee, as well as Peabody, Salem, Gloucester, and Beverly. Those are our 5 largest sending communities where they kind of pull in from. We do also have a former guidance director from Shawsheen who happens to be on our school committee as well. So we did ask him to participate since he was in charge of admissions. We do meet monthly. Steve was actually at the meeting last month. These are all public meetings. They are posted on our website, and the agenda is posted to what we call board docs. So you can easily access any meeting minutes, any presentations, any agenda items. If anyone would like to be on the agenda, you can certainly, request, and, through obviously Steve Bartha, who's the town manager, but, or if you have questions related to the admissions, you can probably go right through Steve, and then we can add it to the agenda item. The purpose of the meeting the purpose of the subcommittee is to look at admissions to make sure that we're carefully thinking about the number of students from each of the communities. So I will say that Danvers did have a spike, comparatively speaking, to the other communities. It's difficult to say why. I mean, short of interviewing all of the 135 applicants, do we really necessarily know? why they're choosing to apply and then coming, but we're definitely aware of that. And then how do we make sure then that there is some leveling? Beverly would like to see more students at Essex Tech. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. So these are some of the conversations that we have in the admissions. All eyes are on the state though. So our admissions policy will remain the same until the state comes out with new guidance. So right now it's in the public comment section or portion of the regulation change, and I believe that goes until June, the end of June. So you can all obviously publicly comment on what you think the changes are, or reflective are, or should be. And then it goes to regulations. Once those regulations are set, we will then look at our admissions policy and determine any changes that we should make.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Move the article?
I'll move the article.
Could I just make one statement before we move the article? I promised I wasn't going to have anything negative to say tonight. I've had enough to say over the last few meetings. I will say this, though. This is a phenomenal budget buster for us in this community. It costs us about $2 million a year more to educate these kids through the process that we're doing right now than it would if those kids were all back at Danvers High School. At least, probably closer to $2.5 million. We cannot afford to have that happen. Other areas of our budget are being hit because of that. Our public education in town is in essence being limited because we are spending the money on the 200 students who have decided to leave the program and go to you folks. This community needs to establish a true direction for what we want within this community, and that means that this board and the school committee and the select board need to meet, and we need to develop a policy that works for us. I'm willing to vote for this because, quite frankly, we have no choice right now. But we have to be willing, as the community, to take a stand on this, or there's a very good chance that we will continue to have 10 and 15% increases every year in this particular budget. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to Article 5. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Chairman, Article number 5 is a standing article each year that authorizes the Treasurer Collector's Office to utilize tools in MGL to collect the property tax. That's about all the explanation I can offer you.
Thank you. We've lost Ted. He texted me he lost his signal. Mike?
Nothing.
Paul?
No, all set.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
No questions, thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move Article 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 6.
Article 6 is required. Town meeting must accept the report that was mailed to their home addresses back in January. So this, again, is a standing article. And everybody should have their annual report at this point. And if not, call Ann Freitas in the morning and we'll get it right to you.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry. Is there a motion? Pardon me.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 7.
Article 7 and 8 we covered during our budget overview with the IT Director, Colby Cousins. If there are follow-up questions, I will do my best to answer them. Otherwise, we would entertain a motion from the FinCom.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Mr. Bradstreet.
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, precinct 1. As far as the technology plan and the budget and the amount, could some money be spent on improving the system in here, depending on how long we're going to be here, or if we have to return? One of the meetings, you all might cut out, and taping cords to the floor I don't think is appropriate.
I think, Bill, by the time those dollars got appropriated, we will no longer be meeting in this space.
Can you guarantee that?
No.
Bill, we're working on it.
That's all I want to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion on Article 7?
Move Article 7.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Article 8, again, we've already received a presentation on this. Any follow-up questions from the board? Audience?
I'll move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 9.
Article 9, I believe we also discussed briefly at the budget workshop, but this is simply the replacement of 2 vans that the schools utilize for some of their off-contract transportation needs.
Right. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, what kind of vans are we talking about?
I think it's an 8-passenger and a 6-passenger.
They're, if
Go
you
ahead.
put them together, they're both 7-passenger vans.
Okay.
Okay,
So, yeah.
that's it?
Sally?
Thank you. Are they replacing current vehicles?
Correct.
And are these, I know sometimes in the schools, they'll do a lease to buy type of situation. These are outright purchases?
We typically lease the buses, but the vans we usually pay cash for.
And the vans that are being replaced, do you have any sense of how old they are? Or-
They are several years old, but they're taken out of service due to some regulations. They're not able to be used at this time, so
because of emissions from the vehicle, or?
I'd have to follow up with Keith DeVerna.
But the
My
vehicles,
understanding is they're not even, they can't even be used as
they
backups right
cannot
now.
be used?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Thank
do
you.
have one of the old school vans, it's our pop-up library. You may recall a couple years ago, the library received one of the vans that was taking a beating in the schools, but was still perfectly adequate for bookshelves and Wi-Fi, so they're using that.
Did you say bookshelves and wine boxes?
No wine boxes, Wi-Fi,
Oh.
sorry.
I just my mind must have just.
Although the
gone-
library is one of, I believe, 4 sites in town where you can get a liquor license, so I suppose if they wanted to serve wine out of the van for a duly approved meeting by the select board, they could do that.
For that, we might need a bigger van, but anyway, you've answered my question.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move
I'll move
Article
the
9.
article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Article 10.
Article 10 is the portion of the warrant where we move into the DPW and capital infrastructure-related projects. So I would like to introduce the team sitting behind me. We have DPW Business Manager Peter Korpusek, who has, I guess I'm just going to embarrass him a little bit. This is his last FinCom hearing. He's worked for the town for close to 50 years. He's announced his retirement later this spring. With him tonight is the Assistant Business Manager, Angelica Medina, that we hired when Peter gave us an inkling last year that this was likely coming. So we have a transition plan in place. Also behind me is Clint Allen, our Assistant Utility Director, Stephen King, our Town Engineer, and Rich Souza, our Director of Operations for DPW. David Lane could not be here tonight, but I have full confidence that the team that is on hand can answer any questions that you may have about the public works-related articles.
Great. Article 10. Mike, any questions?
Not a question, but just to say that, I've had the pleasure for the last 3 years plus to work with Peter on the Municipal Light Board, and there is no better, or has there been a better public employee than Peter Korpusek has been. So I really applaud everything from him.
Paul?
Happy retirement.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
I'll echo what was just said, having served on the Municipal Light Board, that, Peter's work is really outstanding, and, you're applauded, and thank you, and congratulations.
Sally?
Thank you. I meant to look this up earlier today and did not. What was the figure for last year for pavement management and sidewalk?
Rodney's going to look that up, and unless Rich knows off the top of his head.
It was,
We had in the presentation. We're going to race and see who gets it. $348,000.
Thank you. So as is consistent with other efforts during the course of this budgetary process, this has been decreased by about $100,000. So through to the DPW managers back there, will this be sufficient for what you anticipate will be needed in this upcoming fiscal year?
I can probably save them the trip to the microphone to say no. This is an area each year we talked a little bit during the budget presentation. We get, I think we had close to $6 million in capital requests this year, which is typical, and we're lucky to fund 40 to 60% of those, give or take, depending on the situation each year. We have a pavement management plan, we have a roof management plan, we have fleet inventory that's tracked through the system. So we could do more. We contract out for some work. We do some work in-house. I think an interesting question, which will come up later this year related to the ARPA federal stimulus, is to what extent some of those infrastructure dollars can help us catch up a little bit on some of our deferred maintenance. But certainly 248, I think that we could spend multiples of that just to be trying to maintain an average road condition for our high priority streets.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I move Article 10.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 11.
Article 11 was actually discussed last week at the Select Board meeting. We had a lively discussion, and Mr. King is here to speak to what we hope to accomplish this year.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Article 11 is the roadway layout and acceptance of public ways. This is part of our annual program that we've been doing for over 20 years in the engineering division, all except for last year due to COVID. But this year we have 4 streets that we're requesting town meeting to accept as public ways, and they are Avon Road, Holly Lane, Sunset Avenue, and Vineyard Street. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Sally?
Thank you. It's a question I often ask. How close are we to being done with, I know more current roadways, subdivisions, this issue is already taken care of. So we're really talking about some of the older roads.
Correct, yeah, so we're around 52 streets. After we accept these 4, they'll be remaining not public ways, but be put forth for acceptance at future town meetings.
Thank you.
Eric?
How do you determine which roads you want to address with this?
We've gotten down to some of the harder streets in town, but we pretty much base it on if we're already maintaining the street as a way and providing those services on that street, and it meets mostly the subdivision regulations that are set forth from 1979, then we put that forth as a potential street to accept as a public way.
Thank you.
Mike?
No questions.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
No questions.
Any questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, precinct 1. I was quite surprised to hear there were 52 streets still needing to be accepted. This warrant article doesn't mention a dollar amount for the cost of accepting these streets or ways. I guess my question is, or several questions I have is, how much does it cost, or an average cost to accept a street or a way in this town? Is there a list? I know, are you starting from the oldest? Again, the questions might have already been asked. My question was, are you starting with the oldest to the newest streets, or the easier ones to get done, and then the more difficult ones? And I was looking to see if there was a list someplace so I or anyone could see if their way is on, or street is on a list, and when it might be done. What is the cost or average cost for this work?
Mr. Chairman, the average cost through you is roughly $2,200 per street.
Say again?
$2,200 per street.
Is the cost paid by the town, or was the town given or paid money by the developer to pay this cost at some point when the development required a new way or street? This cost should have been, my opinion, should have been paid by the developer. If it wasn't, should or is it being paid by the developer now, possibly retained from the bond that's posted and not all of the bond being returned? My concern is that these ways were created by an entity, not the town necessarily. The town shouldn't have to be paying to have these accepted. The person who, or the entity who created these ways should be the one paying for them. So I guess my question is, did they pay the town at some point in the past and it's in an account to be drawn from, or is this coming from, I don't know, free cash or a very different account? Again, I don't think the town should be paying for this.
Mr. Chairman, so if the road was prior to the acceptance of the regulations in 1979, the subdivision regulations, the town has been paying for those streets to be accepted. If it's post the subdivision regulations, the developer has taken on the cost to provide the layout plans and street acceptance plans for the town to record.
Okay.
And that's in his bond, he goes with through the planning board.
Again, through the chairman, what I'm looking for, if you're going from oldest to newest, how many of these 52 ways are on the oldest part and how many are on the newer part? And if it's so many on the older, again, the town is on the hook for paying for these ways to be accepted. I personally don't think the town should be paying for it, but we're stuck with it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and I'm not happy with it, as long as we're working on it. But I do have those questions.
Yeah, it actually isn't the oldest to the newest. We've actually gone from the easiest to the hardest at this point. So some of the ways that have a lot of deed information and to look up and to assess through each lot, those are some of the streets that we're getting into right now. So it's a little bit more work versus a street that might have been previously laid out prior to subdivision regulations with a plan, but was never formally accepted by the town.
So we're working
So
on
we're working on it.
we're working on changing things. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 12.
Mr. Town Engineer?
Article 12, drainage capital improvements repairs for Frost Brook, cleaning and bank stabilization. If you've been on the board for a couple of years, you know we've continually had to do work in the Frost Brook that runs from the Poplar-Conant Street intersection all the way up through the Woodville area. This is a brook that was actually redesigned through the developer of the Woodville subdivision, creating unnecessary turns and bends within the stream and bank, which has caused a lot of erosion along private property homeowners. We do have an easement to access the stream and brook. We are required to maintain it. It is in our possession, and for the past couple of years, we put forth a couple projects in order to do bank stabilization along the bank and also create better river flow through the area, not to cause so much erosion and tree damage after storms and heavy rain events. So this next article is actually to take care of the upper side of the Cabot head wall near the high school, heading towards Dartmouth Street. and also heading toward what we call the Frostfish Brook Airport branch as well, which heads towards Burley Street. So this would take care of doing a little bit more bank stabilization along the riverbed, stream bed in that area. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Mike?
Nope, I'm all set.
Paul?
Basically, this is an ongoing procedure we have to do. Do we ever get caught up with this, or is it just when we get finished, we start all over again?
We actually are getting caught up with this specific area with the amount of work we've done. This is one of the ones that were highlighted in our stormwater capital plan from the early 2000s. After we did a series of culvert replacements, we then started working on the actual inside the brooks. So we have the airport branch to take care of, then we have the Cherry Hill branch, and that will pretty much close out a lot of the Frostfish Brook area except for the lower portion near Conant and Poplar Street. And then we moving on to doing Beaver Brook and Crane Brook as well.
Then it's a question of maintaining, I would imagine.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Thank you. Will this work be done in-house, or will you be contracting out for this work?
We'd be contracting out for this work.
That's all I had, thanks.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll move the article.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 13.
Wastewater facility improvements, emergency water interconnections. So if you may not know, we have two main connections that we utilize for any emergency water use. That's at the Conant Street, at the Beverly line, and on Water Street at Peabody City line with Danvers. We've recently done a few investigation studies per our water capital program that was approved in 2018. They came up with a few of some rehab and some design plans for us to look at in order to make some improvements to these two existing stations that we know we have to keep up to date and possibly use in the future. This article would help us do finalize a preliminary study, come up with a design plan, and implement the construction and rehab that's necessary to keep those assets being able to be utilized in case of an emergency for the town of Danvers. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Sally?
Thank you. So this money, this $412,000 is still for the evaluation and assessment of what's needed at this point? It doesn't, this money doesn't go towards doing any actual improvements?
This money will cover improvements to the Conant Street station. But mostly we're still studying the Peabody Street interconnection at Water Street.
Okay. Got it. And you anticipate that the assessment you're doing on the Peabody side, towards the Peabody line, that's going to require some additional work at that site as well?
That would require additional construction work and rehab work within the interconnection vault, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric?
So as a follow-up, how much longer will it take to complete what needs to be done for the system?
For the interconnection, at approximately maybe another 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike?
One of these stations is in front of the Sunnyside Bowling Alley, is that right?
That's correct.
Have we ever had to connect that up during a drought or anything for the city of Peabody to get that water?
Hydraulically, we had never opened it. It's already connected. We've always go first to the Conant Street because that water comes from the Salem Beverly Water Supply. We know how much they can provide to us. Not in the last, I believe, 20 years have we ever had to open the interconnection with Peabody. If we do, there is hydraulically some things we need to do in advance of that to shut off certain gates within the Endicott Street area to make sure we're not actually feeding water back into Peabody, but they're actually feeding us.
Thank you.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
All set, thanks.
Any questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. What's the life of these valves that you might have to turn on? And are they checked occasionally or on some program so that when they are needed, you know you'll be able to open them and use them, and not like some of the fire hydrants, they just won't work because they've never been, not in Danvers, but they've never been tested to make sure they're functional?
We know they are functional because we did operate them when we had our VFD failures at the water treatment plant 2 years ago. or 3 years ago now. So we had to make sure in the past couple, and since then, that we continually check them to make sure they're operable for us.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Move Article 13.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 14.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to Article 14, I'm realizing Mr. King is going to present the next 4 or 5, so if you'd like to join us at the table, Stephen, you're welcome to do so, unless you're more comfortable standing.
I'm
Whatever
fine.
you. Okay, good, all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Article 14, State Hospital Reservoir Valve Replacement and Vault Rehab. This is actually a previous article that we've had before town meeting that was accepted. There is a current balance on it. The article you see for tonight is for additional money to complete the final design and construction of rehabbing the existing vault that houses the valve that controls the elevation and pressure levels within the state hospital tank located at the old state hospital grounds in Danvers. This would give us remote capabilities to be able to operate that, so our employees wouldn't have to actually go inside the vault. They could do it remotely, either from the water treatment plant or outside the vault. Also provides electronics, power to the vault for operating the valve, ventilation, and sump pumps for any potential flooding that may occur. Take any questions?
Thank you. Mike?
How often do we use that reservoir in terms of needing to add it into our supply?
Daily.
Yeah, so that's part of our regular
Yep,
supply?
daily.
In terms of, how much, what capacity is that in terms of what percentage would that be of our supply?
That holds 5.4 million gallons.
So
And
roughly-
we draw down that 2 or 3 feet, sometimes 4 feet at night. Once we turn the plant off, we rely on the tanks to both supply the town of Danvers and the town of Middleton.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
My question was answered. Thank you.
Eric?
So my question is, it looks like this goes back to 2013. It's been a while. Why are we still paying for it? Have costs risen, or have we just not appropriated enough along the way?
We did appropriate it, we did start the design, for whatever reason, prior to me getting it, it never got finalized. We kind of reinvigorated the project, but then at that point, we decided to move forward with the chlorine booster station at the Folly Hill water tank and do that project first. So this is pretty much already designed, almost to a 90% level. We have that plan. This basically just takes over the construction of it, because we want to now, the technology's gotten better, the instrumentation's gotten better, so it's a little bit more expensive. It's given us more capabilities to be able to operate that valve a lot easier than it is just to go in the vault now and turn the, basically turn the wheels to operate the tank levels.
Thank you.
Sally?
Thank you. So the reservoir itself, the tank itself must be pretty old too.
Yes, it's one of the only underground storage tanks that are left in Massachusetts besides Salem Beverly. There's only a few of them left.
So do you have a sense of the condition of the tank itself?
Yeah, we just actually did an inspection of the tank last year. I had that report. There were no major flaws brought up in that report. A few minor things that need to get fixed, access hatches on the top, some concrete repair on the top, but that was pretty much it. So it's still in overall really good shape for the age of it.
So this is probably a pretty silly question, but where does the water in there come from?
So all our water comes from our water treatment plant in the town of Middleton, the Middleton Reservoir. So daily when the plant turns on at 6 o'clock in the morning, it feeds the distribution system and also fills the tank after the tanks have fed the town throughout the night. And then that constantly goes on until the plant shuts down, and then the water reverses out of both the tanks to feed both the towns.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 15.
Article 15, wastewater facilities maintenance asset management. This is our annual flushing and cleaning of sewer lines and CCTV inspection. We do this on an annual based on the Mass DEP regulations. We pick certain sections of the town. We camera inspect those mains, look for any inflow and infiltration, any cracks, any spot repairs that are necessary, and give an overall, just a general grade of how our actual wastewater collection system is doing over the years it's been in existence. So we basically put forth an article every year for $200,000. It's a small design cost. We're getting really good favorable numbers from contractors to do this work every year. And this is just something we're required to do for Mass DEP.
Sally?
Thank you. So based on prior years' analysis through this CCTV study, how is the town's wastewater system looking?
Well, based on the CCTV, we've actually come up with a comprehensive lining program for the
Sorry,
areas.
say that again?
Based on the CCTV records that we've seen over the past 10 years, we were able to create a comprehensive lining program to take care of any spot repairs that are needed within the wastewater mains, sewer mains, which actually stops the inflow and infiltration, and that accounts towards our SESD assessment. So every gallon we can take that doesn't go into our system through inflow, through rainwater, is less of an assessment that we have to pay back to SESD.
So it's an investment that helps us basically save our system, but also to save money.
Correct.
Thank you.
Eric?
No questions.
Mike?
All set.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
No, thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 16.
Article 16, the Lakeview Booster Station. This was a booster station that was installed in the early 1990s. It was given by a developer. The town did take over that facility and that street. We are now looking at some of the, based on a condition assessment that was done in 2018, the instrumentation and some of the pumps need some rehabilitation work. We're also seeing some water intrusion from the top of the hatch and some of the concrete from the original placement of the booster station. This money that's put forth on the article for $150,000 gives us a little more deeper look with our consultant to see if we can just rehab in place with the existing vault, or if we need to actually replace the whole system with new pumps, new fire pumps, new programmable logic controls, and new equipment within the station. I don't take
Mike?
any questions.
So, I'm just trying to think, I remember this. Lakeview is the only area in town, for whatever reason, that a lot of those homes have internal fire water in there, don't they? There's sprinkler systems in some of those homes?
Well, that predates my time here. I do not think they have individual booster pumps.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so does this only deal with with Lakeview, that area up there, those?
This only provides, the necessary pressure based on DEP regulations to Lakeview and Brattlesburg.
Is it just because the elevation change was somewhat unique, or?
Yeah, so you lose pounds per square inch for every foot of rise you have in elevation. And DEP mandates that you have at least over 22 pounds per square inch on the minimum running through. They like to see 30, 35 at the second floor. So in order to provide that, you do need to have booster pumps to actually increase the pressure throughout that neighborhood.
Do we have any other areas in town that need this level of boostering to get the water there?
Yeah, so we have one on Summer Street in Delaware for that area.
Yeah.
We have the Green Street Booster Station, and we have Putnam Lane Booster Station as well.
Okay, so just those, but pretty much just those four?
Yep.
Those 4 areas. Okay, thank you.
And Folly Hill, but we haven't accepted that
Yeah.
one yet.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Thank you. Mine is just, again, thinking where in the process this money would go, and it's for design work and to develop recommendations at this point. It's not to actually take action.
It's not to take any direct construction action.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, is there a
I'll
motion?
move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 17.
Article 17, John George Park Gangway Improvements and Bank Stabilization. This article is in order for us to apply for an MVP grant. We are an MVP community, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Act community. We got that designation 2 years ago through the state. Frees us for open up to some cash from the state in order to perform climate resilient type projects. We've had this one on our radar for a while at John George Park to stabilize the shoreline banking at the marina. We're also protecting the SESD interceptor that's actually behind the bank as well. So the $25,000 is a 25% match based on a design number we got from our consultants for $100,000. In the next round of grant funding that opens up, we'd apply for the grant, show that we're going to put forth a 25% match, and hopefully we'd be awarded the project funds to move forward with doing a design and permitting as well.
Sally?
I have no questions, thank you.
Eric?
No questions.
Mike?
Seems to be an awful lot of studies on this embankment in the last couple of years. I hope there's some actual work to be done there eventually. And once and again, I'd like to mention the fiberglass type setup that's down in Salem near the Palmer Cove Yacht Club. I think we ought to really consider looking at that. I don't know if, I mentioned it to David Lane 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years. And if Salem can get that approval, I don't see why Danvers can't, because you've tried vegetation a couple of times, step vegetation, and that hasn't worked. So I'm just hoping eventually you'll get to a point where you'll do some work there, because those people are going to be, as it is now, they can go in their bedroom and throw a fishing pole out the window and catch a few fish. So it's getting kind of close.
Yes, we've had a long talk with a lot of the permitting groups that would be involved in the project, and so we're working through some of those ideas that they'd like to see, and like they would actually approve for actual construction funding too. So I think at this point, us as a town, we're really trying to make sure that the funds are coming from outside sources and not internally through general funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paul?
Yeah, it appears that there's been some legitimate attempts to rectify the situation, but unsuccessfully. Now, I'm familiar with where George, the park is. Does the whole area back up into private property too? Is that part of the problem?
No, it would just be the public property, not the private cove side, beyond the McDougal Ave.
All right, then, would there be any opportunity, or would it be prohibited to have something more permanent other than embankment, vegetation, something like a walkway, boardwalk, or a boardwalk type thing, or is that totally out of the question with the environment to stabilize the bank?
Through the process with the permitting and regulators, we're going to have to walk through all those scenarios that we think would work in that area, or we'd like to propose to them to see what would be favorable. What would they ultimately fund for construction at the end of the day? 'Cause
So you're not prohibiting the possibility of permanent structure. Am I reading you right on that? Am I hearing that? Not that we would do it, or I was just wondering if the state or whoever gets involved, the EPA, would that be permitted? Excuse me.
It's all the entities. It's coastal zone management, it's the EPA, it's the
Right.
Mass DEP. All of those people are going to have a chance to weigh in on what they actually want to see as a final product, and we're all going to have to come to some type of agreement what would actually work there.
Right.
And we're going to have to provide a tidal analysis study, flow metrics for the rapids through there, maybe rearrangement of the floats, the marina out there. We're going to have to look at a whole different scenarios to help make sure we can protect that shoreline so it doesn't erode any more than it does. So we like to keep every option on the table and present that to the regulators, and hopefully they'd be amenable to one of those options.
Well, thank you.
Mike?
Nope, good, thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 18.
Actually, before we go to 18, I'd like to propose we jump to 22 while Mr. King is still standing, and then we can let him sit and have a rest.
Sure. Article 22, drainage maintenance. Page 12 in your hymnals.
Article 22, drainage maintenance. This is our typical annual $25,000 increment that we put into the warrant article for any extenuating circumstances to repair any stormwater infrastructure and drainage mains within the town. We do have a few projects that we have that we'd like to complete on Burley Street, Elliott Street, and Conant Street. And this is a revolving fund, so we use this, we take care of this, we use this money as we see fit for any emergency repairs, possibly prior to any paving work. I'll take any questions.
Okay. Mike?
No, well said, thank you.
Paul?
All set?
Mike?
No questions?
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Is this a pretty standard amount that we've allocated each year? Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Steve, have a seat.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll jump back to page 9, Article 18.
Article 18 is maintenance dredging. As you'll note from the narrative, the last major dredging project we did in town was back in 2008 when we dredged 2 of the 4 rivers. That project carried a cost of a little over $2 million. We are getting ready for the next major dredging, likely 5 or 6 years out from now, 2027. And all 4 rivers are slated for dredging, so we're expecting a considerably larger project than we did in 2008. What we're voting on tonight is a small allocation each year into a capital account that will eventually be used to start to do some of the feasibility and soft cost work associated with that project, which will position us to pursue grants, et cetera, and do some of the design work. So happy to take any questions you have.
Sally?
Thank you. A capital account, money to put into a capital account. Is this similar to like the school building account, the stabilization account, other accounts that money is put aside for a particular purpose, accumulated over time?
Yes and no. When we approve, like the article we talked about for the work that was started in 2013, we set up an account, we set up a project account for something like that. So the $130,000 went in, and it'll stay there. It's a non-lapsing account. So once the monies are appropriated in, they stay until town meeting appropriates them back. Either they're spent or they're appropriated back out. So in this case, we have an account that has been on the books for many years. Money goes in, the purpose is explained to town meeting, and then when the time comes, those funds can be spent to start to do the preliminary work for the project itself.
So when you referred a moment ago to a project in 2013, what project were you referring to?
So Mr. King was asked, and I have to go back, it was Article 14. So back in 2013, $130,000 were appropriated for the state hospital reservoir valve replacement.
Yes.
That money would sit there for as long as, until town meeting does something, either the project is completed or town meeting could appropriate the money back out and spend it on either a different project or let it flow back to free cash.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Eric?
I almost lost the question. How much will we need necessary? So this amount this year, same amount next year, we'll just keep adding similar amounts, or will the amount vary?
So $20,000 has pretty consistently been the appropriation in. I believe the balance in there, the finance director was just mentioning to me, is roughly $100,000.
Okay.
So this appropriation will bring it up to $120,000. Several years from now, we'll be closer to $200,000, and that'll give us funds to start doing some of the work that we need to do to prepare for grant applications and the like. The project cost itself will probably be between $5 and $7 million once we get there.
Thank you.
Mike?
Are you going to approach any of the marinas to piggyback on this operation in a few years?
I believe that's historically been the practice. We're probably a little ways out from starting that conversation with them.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
Now, Steve, did you just mention when we're ready to go to start the project, you're looking at a cost of maybe 7 or 8 million?
Well, no, you're rounding up, Paul, and I don't want to be quoted on that. What we noted in the narrative, the last project in 2008 was $2.13 million, but that was only 2 of the 4 rivers. So I think what we're saying here, it could be 2 to 3 times as much, but we won't know that until we get into the design itself.
So $20,000 is not going to get us there if we got that.
It'll
high.
position us to start preparing for grant applications and getting some of the preliminary work done, so we'll have a better sense of what the cost is.
Would there
I
be-
believe we normally bond for this and then offset that cost with grants to the
Grants.
extent we can.
It wouldn't include bonding, would it?
I believe it would. I believe historically we've bonded for the dredging. Those are large enough, we wouldn't pay cash for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this sludge going to be disposed of out at sea? Or where are they going to dispose of the sludge? Because we had a few years ago, we had quite a problem to get this corrected, because years ago, somebody was doing it on land.
I don't have an answer yet. Wouldn't it be great if we could fill in the horseshoe at the landfill for our solar? We'll get back to you with that.
Well,
I don't
I
have
know
an
there's
answer for you.
contaminants in there still. So I think the last time they had to take it on a barge and bring it out to some island out in
I think-
toward Boston somewhere.
I think you're correct in that the on-land disposal options are few and far between
Limited,
at this
yeah.
point.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, precinct 1. In the past, they've just dredged the channel. I don't know how wide the channel is. Obviously, it costs more to widen the channel. Would that be prudent for the future if we widened it now to make it easier or less costly, perhaps, to dredge it? Or is that not the way they do things?
Sorry, David Lane is texting in real time to say it's going out to sea for this question from Mr. Daly. Bill, I don't have a good answer for you. I know, widening the channel is going to have a direct impact on the abutting properties as that sludge starts to settle in again. So typically you scoop out the channel and slowly it backfills with silt from the banks and the shores. Given the geography, I think we're very limited we certainly wouldn't be widening the rivers, but I don't have a very specific answer for you tonight on that.
I don't think I'm asking to widen the river, but to widen the channel. Something was mentioned about, or we've been talking about, vegetation to stop the sludge water from coming in. Something was mentioned about using fiberglass panels. If we were to use panels to stop the banks from disappearing into the channel and filling it up, causing the dredging to be done periodically, could we accomplish both, widening it, but stopping some of the sludge or all of it from filling the channel up again, so that we're not every 10, 15, 20 years doing the same thing over and over? Is there a more practical or a better way of doing this, I guess, is what I'm looking for?
I don't know. I don't think hardening the banks on those rivers is something that we would be able to get permitted. I think Mr. Daly referenced how much trouble we've had just getting vegetative solutions down at John George Park, so.
I also think there's an in and out problem with that too, which is the silt isn't only coming from the sides, it's also coming from the fact that that's basically a toilet that flushes in and flushes out with a complete change of the water over the course of the day. So I think, that silt is being brought in from the ocean as well, so you really can't, I don't think that helping on the sides does the whole job for you.
So it's going to be a continuing problem as long as the rivers are there and we want to use them. So we're not working on it then?
Bill, I think the rivers would probably contend that we're the problem, not the river.
Yeah. It's my job to tell you sometimes, no, we're not working on it.
Oh, gee.
We did get an answer from David Lane while we were chatting. So there are lines. We're very limited in we dredge the V, we've dredged the channel, and the state is very strict in terms of going inside or outside of those boundaries. So you don't widen the corridor that you dredge. You simply clean it out, and then over time, as Mike said, it'll slowly fill in again.
I guess my question would be, if they won't let us do this, shouldn't they be paying for it to be done, as opposed to us?
No, because I believe the state is agnostic as to whether we decide to dredge these or not. This is to make them navigable.
Pass the buck.
They don't really care if people can get from Danvers Port to
Pay to play.
Atlantic Ocean.
All right.
Any other questions?
I'll move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 19.
Article 19 is actually requesting that town meeting modify two prior votes in 2018 and 2019. Both of those years, we had been setting aside funds to pursue grants for the expansion of the rail trail, matching grants. And last year, when COVID was starting, we were finishing some of the conceptual design work on the Hay Barn project to convert that into a civic space. It would have required several $1 million in bonding on top of the $1 million MassWorks grant that the town obtained. During that budget process, all boards agreed that the timing was wrong to be issuing debt for a space that was designed explicitly to host large gatherings. We worked with the state last spring, and they approved reappropriating the balance of that grant, which was just under $900,000, to allow us to complete the first phase of the rail trail. At the same time, the existing rail trail, which gets a tremendous amount of use, has several capital projects that have been identified in partnership with Public Works. So the vote tonight would effectively expand the allowable uses of those prior votes so that drainage work and improvements to the existing trail can be done without seeking additional appropriations. So the MassWorks grant is sufficient to complete the first phase of the trail expansion, and town and meeting is being asked to allow some of the previously appropriated dollars to be used to fix some existing issues with the rail trail.
Mike?
Despite my sizable girth, I am a big fan of the rail trail. But I think it probably needs to be said that initially when that rail trail was done, and I was around and sort of part of it, the community was promised that there would be no ongoing maintenance costs that would be associated with that. I personally have no issue with us sort of changing that policy a little bit, but is this a change in policy or more because these are sort of a unique allocation of a one-time fund that we would be allowed to do, or do we anticipate that that is now a public facility in which we will take on the maintenance responsibilities for it?
So I'd say two answers to the question. I think we're about 4 years in now to budgeting $8,000 a year for ongoing maintenance costs. I would say the Rail Trail Committee does tremendous work with volunteers and fundraising to maintain that 4-mile trail. But some of the needs, for example, when some of these drainage issues come along and there's chronic washout, and we have thousands of people on it every year, it really outstrips their capacity to take on those types of projects. So Public Works has been working in close partnership with the Rail Trail Committee for the past 4 or 5 years. And so in the grounds article, you'll see an $8,000 continuing appropriation for routine maintenance. These are needs that have been identified. Were it not for the MassWorks grant being reappropriated, this likely would have shown up as a separate request for additional dollars. So instead, we want to reallocate some of the old dollars. But it certainly is, especially with the expansion. Once the rail trail is in place, going from the downtown to Middleton, and we essentially have a T, crisscrossing Danvers, that will the need for partnership will continue in perpetuity on that.
Good, thank you.
Paul?
So what we're looking at now, I think, if I read the figures correctly, is, I believe, $888,000, no?
So that's the balance of the $1 million MassWorks grant that the town was awarded.
Hay Barn?
I think for the Hay Barn in 2017.
That's being moved over to rail trail expansion?
Correct. DHED approved that last year to do the first phase of the rail trail. In a separate account, there were funds to be used to pursue that expansion.
That was $100,000, right?
There's $100,000. So this,
we're close to $1 million now, between those.
consider those as separate buckets. So the MassWorks grant will complete the first phase of the rail trail. That leaves behind the prior appropriation, which instead of being used for the expansion would be used for maintenance, outstripping the annual appropriation for the existing trail.
When do we, I guess Mr. Chairman, you can tell me, overrule me, but are we presently starting on the expansion towards Middleton, or is that still in the planning process?
That's been designed, and it should be installed this year. Mr. King's actually been working closely with Aaron Henry from our land use department, and the bridge has been spec'd out to cross the Beaver Brook. So the phase from essentially behind the Cherry Fish Market out to basically Maple Street, if I have my locations, should be done probably by spring of '22, Stephen, if I...
Yes, right now, we have the project advertised to construct the bridge that'll be open this week, and then we'll be moving on to doing construction this summer. So what we call the Beaverbrook Bridge will be completed by the end of the fall, with some leftover from cleanup and restoration next year. So in FY '22, we expect the bridge to be open and be available to use for pedestrians. And that will open up that expansion phase from Hobart Street all the way up to Maple Street. And then we'll have another Phase 1B, call it, which will help us do a crossing over Route 62 Maple Street, going down behind the College Pond.
We crossing Route 62, are we going under 62 or?
We're going, right now, we have initial plans to go over 62, not go underneath
In
it.
other words, there'll be a
Yep.
pedestrian path walkway across 62 at some point, right?
Yes, yeah.
You're
We'll have
not
to do
talking
some.
about up over.
It won't be, no, will not be a bridge over 62. It will be a signalized type intersection, not with traffic signals, but we'll have to do some redesign of Vineyard Street coming into Maple Street in order to do that street crossing.
And once you get through 62, now you're out into that long stretch that comes back over to 62 again.
Correct, when we start getting into the Mass DOT layout.
Yeah.
Where we'll have to partner
Are
with.
there any plans to include the College Pond area, or is that not a situation, because it's a very picturesque area? I didn't know whether you were planning to go that way, or if there was any, like a spur in and around it. Just curious, if that's
As of
been
right now, we're
discussed.
just planning to utilize the existing right-of-way that's there for Danvers Electric and
But I
keep
will-
that as the
But
main
that's
trail.
way away from it's sort of away from the College Pond, isn't it? I mean,
It is, yeah.
I would add that the Rail Trail Advisory Committee has developed a strategic plan. It's a couple of years old. They developed it a few years ago, and one of their primary objectives was the expansion we're talking about, but a number of the other ideas in that plan include some of the spurs that you're describing. So tying into Rebecca Nurse, for example, the existing rail trail goes quite close to the Rebecca Nurse property. We've looked at ways for using some of the complete streets concepts that we've opted into that program, so we're looking for ways to connect the rail trail, the artery, to some of the sites like College Pond, like Rebecca Nurse Homestead, where we could get people off of the rail trail to some of these sites.
Well, you could also connect over towards Endicott Park.
Right.
Easily.
And
I mean,
it
what-
dovetails with a lot of the pedestrian and bicycle mobility
Now,
that we've been talking about in recent years.
Is it, I'm sure it's complicated but doable to get in and around Route 1 and 95.
We'll definitely be partnering with the state on that. There's really kind of three sections. There's the section we're talking about, there's the section that crosses the stateways, and then there's that home stretch past Leahy up to the Middleton town line, where they are working on their own plans for a rail trail, so that eventually you could get from Cherry Street Fish Market to downtown Middleton on this new rail trail. So we'll have Peabody and Wenham going one direction, and then into downtown Middleton going another direction.
How committed is Middleton to come our way? Because that's basically, we're going up to the vocational technical school, and that's pretty much where the line is, the town line, and they're coming down, I would
So
assume.
they did purchase that right-of-way from the town several years ago for this purpose. I don't know where they are in their planning. I
That's
suspect
Middleton.
once Danvers completes its trail on their town border, then the pressure will really start to increase on Middleton to get rolling with theirs. I know that it's, joking aside, I know that they, when they acquired that corridor from the town of Danvers several years ago, that was the purpose, was to install a town rail trail there, but I don't know the status of that.
So the 8,000 that we're going to double, I mean, there's going to be an increase, which I would support, because I support the rail trail, but we're going to see some increased annual costs and maintenance with the expansion and/or spurs that go either way, you know.
Not necessarily. So the Rail Trail Committee, through the sale of their mile markers along the trail, they fundraise a considerable amount that they use to maintain the trail. They do a lot of the projects themselves. Again, 4 or 5 years ago, the town started appropriating $8,000 to support them, thinking about, if you know the area that goes, I think it's just near Poplar where the dentist office is, and you kind of traverse the side of the parking lot there. We did some asphalt work and a catch basin in there. That's above and beyond what the Rail Trail Committee can do. So we need to have a funding source where we can come in and do some of those projects to support the program. But they do a lot of the work, a lot of the maintenance never comes to us. We don't see it. They take care of it. So the 8,000 is to cover some of those smaller maintenance projects. But when we think about, you might have a couple 100-yard stretch where you have chronic drainage issues and the trail's underwater, and what it requires is light excavation, installing drain pipe, repairing the surface. That also outstrips both the Rail Trail Committee and the $8,000 annual appropriation. Those are few and far between, but those are the types of projects we're talking about when we're talking about the prior appropriation. So that was probably a very confusing explanation, but they're different, a lot of things going on the rail trail.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, that College Pond area is a beautiful area. It's to me, it's worth getting off the rail trail and walking into that area. Maybe not all the way around, it probably couldn't be done, it's very expensive, but just a spur, a platform, a walk around and turn around. And it's right down below where I live off of Summer Street.
I know the Rail Trail Committee is always looking for new volunteers, Paul.
Right now I'm tied up, thank you.
Mike?
So the state is okay with transferring this money from the hay bond to the rail trail?
They approved that last year, yep.
Okay. And part of this is going down College Pond and down towards Spring Street?
So this first
And across-
phase, eventually, but this first phase, I know Mr. King just said, and I forgot specifically where we're going to terminate the current phase, but it's kind of a three-phase project.
Yeah, the current phase, as we call them, phase 1, is split up into 2 separate sections. So phase 1A takes us from the Cherry Street Fish Market to Maple Street. That's phase 1A. Phase 1B will take us from Maple Street, crossing Maple Street to Spring Street or Nickel Street, that intersection, right before we get to the Mass DOT layout of Route 95 and Route 1.
And then you're going to need a skyhook to get across the highway to get to Middleton, right?
Well, we have preliminary designs right now that there are existing sidewalks and pathways that go along 95, underneath 95 and Route 1. But we're going to have to work with the DOT in order to make sure that we have the same alignment with the visions for how they want to see that constructed.
Sounds like Xfinity and beyond, so.
No, just Middleton. It's
No
just
other
Middleton.
questions?
I'll say a couple final things. The Aaron Henry has informed me, he spoke to the Middleton planner 2 weeks ago. They're very committed to doing their rail trail. But to put this in context, we're years, not months. So completing the first phase of this, they've been designed so that even if we have to do a phase and then stop for a while, there's some logic to where the termination points are. So even building it out to Maple Street, as Mr. King described, is going to open up the accessing the downtown without a car to a considerable swath of our community and pick up a school along the way. Eventually, we'd like to get to the next stage, and then ultimately, even if it's 10 years from now, we want to be able to connect the downtowns. But this won't be a 2-year project. This is a major project.
Okay, I pass.
Eric?
Are there any, since I'm visual, are there any maps that show the various phases and what you're thinking about? Anything that's been published or posted? I haven't checked the website in a while.
Somewhere on the website, I don't know, I would ask.
In past warrant article books, we have put out a phase map of where each section is going to line up. We can obviously always throw that up on the engineering website as well and publish that so people can see as we're moving along where we are in the process. And we usually do that with all our capital projects anyways on engineering.
If there's a simple one, I'd be interested. Rail Trail, I will tell you, is one of the amenities that brought me to Danvers, and so I'm a huge fan. Anything that's related to the rail trail and expansion. And since I'm relatively new, I get lost when I'm trying to follow you all in terms of where you're saying from one point to the other. So
Yeah. We should make sure if it's not there, whether we're linking to the rail trail website or we put something on the planning website, I think it makes a lot of sense to show a phase map of this project, so I appreciate that.
thank you.
Sally?
I was thinking that even for purposes of our discussion tonight, it probably would have been helpful to have a slide or something to look at. But I think it's a great project, and I'm appreciative that the state would allow the reallocation of those funds. So I think it'll be a great help.
Any questions from the audience?
Move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 20.
Articles 20 and 21, I would invite Rich Souza, our Director of Operations, up to the microphone to speak to. These are standing articles. Before the question is asked, I'll simply note, last year, $328,000 was appropriated for the grounds article. You'll note this year it's down to $90,000. And for the buildings article, $367,000 was appropriated last year, and we're looking at $185,000 requested this year. Similar to my statement earlier, I think it's early to tell, but there may be some opportunity for some of the infrastructure funds through the federal stimulus to catch up on some of this type of work as well.
Rich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Article 20, building improvements. This is multiple projects we have planned. We have building modifications. This is funds that are available. If there's unplanned issues that come up, or if there's changes that we want to make, we use those to address those situations in town buildings. Generator transfer at engine number 2. That's going to be a full replacement. That generator has become old and antiquated. We cannot get parts for that anymore, so that needs to be a full replacement. The Holton Richmond copper roof replacement. There was a severe storm, damaged the copper roof, so we had received quotes, and it's about $50,000 to repair and replace that section, as well as some of the roofing underneath that. Riverside School roof study and test cuts. This is to better understand the construction of that roof, similarly what we did at Highlands. This is necessary to get the MSBA accreditation. Again, so Riverside classroom carpet replacement with VCT. This will be the last phase for that school. We've been, I think it's been 3 years of that school, and Great Oak will be the next one we go to, but this year we put this in just because we are at that last phase. And then last is classroom modifications, which is similar to the building modifications, that if unplanned projects arise within the schools, we're able to address those with these funds.
Thank you. Sally?
I have no questions. Thanks very much.
Eric?
A couple questions, particularly on the roofs. Roofs drive me crazy. And so I'm interested in the maintenance or warranty of it, both the Holton Richmond and the Riverside School roofs. Do we generally get warranties or have repairs that have warranties that go along with them? And would this repair, let's say the copper roof replacement, would that come with the warranty? So all about warranties and insurance and coverage. I want someone else to pay for it.
Right, so I believe both of these would be out of warranty due to the age of both roofs.
Sure.
So that doesn't really qualify for either of these roofs.
Thank you. And then my last question on the Riverside roof study, was that part of a capital plan? Are the roofs in our capital plan in general? And so I would imagine that would be somewhere in our capital plan. This roof would have come up previously.
Yeah, we did the Highlands roof a couple years ago, and the Riverside roof was on our radar at that point. One of the things that we were, I will say, surprised by, the Highlands School, there was an original part of the school and an addition part of the school, and we got it approved by the MSBA. Once we got in and started opening the roof up, we learned some very shocking facts about the old roof and the new roof. So what we're doing here is to do some preliminary testing to make sure we understand the scope of the work at Riverside before we proceed next year, most likely with a request to do the actual roof replacement.
Thank you.
Mike?
Oh, no questions.
Paul?
Just one question on the Riverside flooring replacement. You're going to take out carpeting and put in VCT?
Vinyl tile.
Vinyl tile, okay. That's it. Thank you.
Mike?
Nope, good, thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. As far as the Holton Richmond building, wasn't that roof damaged not too long ago? And if it was repaired, with the guaranteed or however the warranty, would it been from when it was first done or when it was repaired? I don't know. I don't remember when it was damaged. It was something to do with a unit or something on top of the school, bad weather, whatever, but it caused some damage. I guess, is
Yeah.
the insurance from then forward or from when it was first put in forward?
So I'm unaware of that particular incident where you talked about that damage. This was due to a severe storm, so I don't think that would qualify under a different warranty.
I think that this particular roof is part of the original copper roofing of the school that is older than you are, Bill.
Thanks.
And that particular damage you're talking about was on a newer piece of roof from the renovation and expansion of the building back however many more recent years ago.
Thank you for the explanation.
Any other questions?
Move Article 20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 21, Rich.
Okay, Article 21, grounds improvements. This is for maintenance and improvements on the town properties, athletic fields and playgrounds. So this year, we're going to be working at Plains Park, doing Brown Memorial Field repairs. It's just work to the infield leveling, laser leveling, and eliminating trip hazards that exist for the American League. There is, it wasn't at print, but there is a $5,000 from Danvers American Little League. They're going to help out with repairs. The estimates came in at $25,000. So working with them to get this project done. So they're very positive there. We spoke about the rail trail maintenance and surfacing, the $8,000 that we have each year. For example, we just completed some drainage at 40 Locust Street. It's the dentist office. There was drainage issues there. So we obviously set up a dry well, did some grading, and paved that area. And it actually was right before the large nor'easter we had, and it's working great. Next project is Danvers High School tennis courts. There has been a surfacing issue where the life expectancy is basically getting to the point, and we've been losing the blue surfacing. It's been noted, and as well as a large crack. Pretty much follows the nets. So that will be addressed, and the court will be resurfaced. Water bubble replacement. These funds are through WUMP, the Water Use Management Program, and these are to replace older leaking water bubblers at parks and playgrounds. And then lastly, we have Endicott Child Barn repairs. This is to finish the project. There's been significant work done to that building, and this will wrap up other exterior smaller projects that we can wrap up and put this one to complete. And that's it for that one.
Thank you. Mike?
So this article encapsulates my most favorite thing in town government and my least favorite. My most favorite is the use of the word water bubbler and the fact that we have a water bubbler article in our town meeting. And the second is, I wasn't on this board 6 years ago, but I remember being told by a lot of people that we were messing up somehow with the tennis courts and that we should have spent more money to get the better tennis courts. And we didn't, and now we're spending $27,000 because they're cracking. And the problem I have with this is they'll always be cracking. I mean, that's what happened with the last one. So maybe I'll be gone, but in 20 years, whenever we replace those tennis courts again, can we not go cheap on it and actually do the right thing and do the good tennis courts so that we're not coming back with cracked weeds growing up through them, which is what's going to happen, discoloration. But that's it.
Sounds good.
Like where I'm from, they're called drinking fountains. I don't know what a water.
They're called bubblers, and that's what they should be called.
They're called water fountains where I come from. But anyway, I think we did those tennis courts when we did the athletic complex. think
I don't recall whether it was done as part of the Fields project, but it was around the same time.
I can't remember what Mike's recalling about the type of repairs we did, to be honest with you, but.
This
I
is,
have
and it's pretty common, David Mountain, if you were here, would say you can, in New England, because of the winters, you can expect to get 5 to 7 years out of the surface, but you should get more out of the base, I think, and that's what Mike is talking about, is
Right.
if the ground beneath your courts isn't suitable or it isn't properly based, you can have issues with the cracking.
And all those projects, whether you're looking at the turf or you're looking at the track, I mean, eventually you're going to come down to some major expenses to replace them. They don't wear and tear that well. If you live in a better climate, you'd be growing grass out in those fields. But that's not the case, so I'm all set.
Okay. Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
I wasn't going to, but since Mike brought it up, I will ask, can you define what you mean by water bubbler?
A water fountain, if you can.
The
get
typical
water.
fountain?
Yes.
The standard, it's not the one that I can stick my,
No, those ones aren't,
okay.
no.
But we have been doing those as part of the swap out. So like
Right.
at Putnam Park, in a number of the parks where we've swapped them out, not in all places, but where we can. Yeah, that's a good point.
My question has been answered.
Great. Sally?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to Article 23.
So before we do Article, for those who were taking notes at the beginning of those two articles, I was reading the request line, not last year's appropriation line. So we did not appropriate $328,000 last year for grounds. We appropriated $137,000. The request this year was $328,000. And given the free cash certification that we had, we were able to recommend $90,000. Similarly, on the buildings improvement, we appropriated $303,000 last year, and we're recommending $185,000 this year. So just wanted to clarify that. Article 23, drainage liability. Oh,
22.
No, we did
no, we
21
did
already.
22. Yep.
Thanks, Rich.
This again is a standing article. Each year we are required to hold the state harmless for drainage work that they do within the town of Danvers. It had been reliably opposed by Dave McKenna before he retired from this committee. It had also been reliably opposed by Bill Clark, but he's now retired from the select board. So we're looking for new minority votes to oppose this particular article each year. We need it to pass, or the state won't come in and do drainage work in Danvers, but we've lost 2 no votes on this in the last few years.
Sally?
Well, I'll consider that job. But I know how both Mr. Clark and Mr. McKenna felt about it, and it didn't bother me as much as it bothers those guys. So I'm going to go for it, but I think our next article is we might lose our great DPW team, and I just wanted to take a minute myself to thank you, Peter, for all you've done for the town, and to wish you a very happy retirement. That's it for me.
Eric?
I will say, I don't know if I feel strongly about a no, but the language certainly is daunting and not to my liking. So if you would ask for an abstention when you call the vote, I might appreciate it.
Well, we'll see how the vote goes.
If you vote against it, we're going to have to call for a revote.
Yes.
Okay.
Mike?
I think enough has been said. I'm going to pass.
Paul?
I'm passing.
Mike?
I think the language looks wonderful.
Well, it was written by an attorney.
That's right.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'd just like to echo the comments or the sentiment of Bill Clark and the other select person. Why do we cover the possible expense for something the state does? I don't know. If we do something, we have to cover an unexpected expense. If the state does something, they can merely pass on this mistake or whatever damage to us because we let them come in and do this. Again, it's the wording, I guess. Abstention, maybe, but I just, as Mr. Clark and others have said, why are we taking possibly the responsibility for some other entity doing some work in our town?
Because they tell us to?
I hear what you're saying. I don't accept it. The state should do a better job.
Because we exist at their will?
I'm not happy with that either.
I know, but that's how the world works.
I'm not happy with that either. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. I'll carry the torch for Mr. Clark and Mr. McKenna for a year, just 1 year.
1 year. We have room for an abstention.
I will abstain.
Very well.
Thank you.
The article passes.
Barely.
Very good, yes. Article 24 is another annual vote by town meeting. Under Mass General Law, we have the authority and ability to create revolving accounts that operate under control of various departments. In the book, you see that we have 9 distinct revolving accounts. In each of the narratives, we show the approved amount. It's not an appropriated amount. It's the approved amount from last year and the requested approval for this year. Each of these accounts relies on revenue in, so if there's not revenue into these accounts, there can be no expenditure out of these accounts. Some of them are used more frequently than others. We have dropped some of these off in recent years. Probably the largest and most notable one here is the child care revolving account. That's where we fund our after-school programming through the recreation department. That's the largest at $690,000. The one change this year, you'll note, the preservation fund, the requested approval is $10,000 this year instead of $100,000, and that is because the Preservation Commission, through authority provided to it by town meeting several years ago, gave 2 grants this year. Select Board Chair Dan Bennett serves on that committee, and we had 2 applications that were approved this year, one to the Historical Society and one to the Rebecca Nurse, to the Danvers alarm list. So the funds remaining in that account are $10,000, which is why the item was dropped here, because there is no revenue into that account per se. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Sally?
No, I think the revolving funds work very well, and I'm really pleased with the child care program in particular. And another one, for the Council on Aging. I think they just help a lot of people out. I'm glad we have them.
No questions.
Mike?
I'm satisfied with these. Thank you.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
We're good.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 25, debt stabilization.
I'm going to turn it over to the Finance Director to talk about Articles 25, 26, and 27.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Through you, Mr. Chairman, Article 25 is our funding of the debt stabilization fund. As we've talked about previously, this is to fund taking on debt associated with various capital bonding projects, previously the high school, middle school, and most recently the Smith project. We're recommending an appropriation of $1.5 million into the fund, and this is in line with our 5 to 6 year projection to fully phase on the Smith School debt into the tax levy.
Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Paul?
I'm all set, thanks.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Thank you. So initially, this fund was specifically referred to the high school, middle school project. And I remember a few years ago it was changed to debt stabilization. But there's this statutory reference of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B. Can this fund be used for other than school projects?
Yes.
For now, the anticipation is, as you just said, Rodney, will be towards the Smith School After that is done, what other things do you think you might use this fund for in the future?
So the most likely would be for a consolidated public works facility. That's the next major capital project that we've been, that is in the capital plan. The select board established it as one of its objectives for the year to try to advance that through the feasibility phase. So David Lane and the team behind me is working right now with Weston and Sampson to resolve space needs, inventory space, what type of parcels might be required to host a facility like that. It is a project that will be defrayed across water, sewer, electric, and the general fund, but there certainly will be a sizable debt component associated with that. And the way that the debt budget works, we talk about it offsetting school projects because the majority of our debt is related to schools, but in reality, all of those dollars are fungible within debt service. So it's really it's a mechanism that exists through general law that we can use to defray the peak debt years regardless of what is driving those peak debt years. So we did, originally it was the HS/MS fund. 5 years ago, we called it the School Stabilization Fund, but again, in practice, it's a debt stabilization fund, and I think that's a clear message to the rating agencies in the outside world in terms of how we use this particular account.
So say we get to the DPW project, would you envision this, and I know we're voting for just what's happening this year, but just talking out of the box, would it be used to do what we've done, which is to kind of shave off the peak years of the bonding of these projects?
That's a possibility. I think it really is a policy, it becomes a policy question. We talked briefly when we were looking at the Smith School project about pursuing a debt exclusion versus the use of the debt stabilization fund. Historically, the approach in Danvers has been to build up that fund and then use it to buy down the peak debt years. So that would be an option that would remain if that was the decision that was made.
It was kind of behind the question, definitely. Did you have something to add? Okay. I've got it, thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
I'll move the question.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 26, OPEB.
Article 26 is our annual contribution into the OPEB trust fund from the general fund. This year we're recommending $450,000. That is, as is our policy, to increase by $50,000 increments each year.
Sally?
I think we probably already talked about this question that comes to mind for me, which is currently, what's the projection for when we'll be fully funded?
For OPEB, I think there's a lot of variables for that. Unlike the pension where we have a set date of 2035, we have no set date for OPEB. We still have a very sizable liability.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric?
No questions.
All set.
No question, thank you.
Mike?
Nope, I'm all set.
Any audience questions? Is there a motion?
Move Article 26.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 27.
Article 27, this is bond proceeds and premiums. So there's two parts of this article. Both, I think, represent good news. Article 1 is appropriating some unspent bond proceeds related to the high school project of $362,926, which represents, again, that project coming in on time and under budget. And then the second piece is a total of $584,034 related to certain premiums received from the issuance of bonds. Again, by being a AAA community, when we go out to bond, there's a premium associated with purchasing our debt. And certain projects, we've made sure the language matches so that we can resize the debt, so essentially borrow less and incorporate the premium. Some of the projects that happened 2 or 3 years ago didn't have that language. Or, for example, if we do a short-term note, that won't have the language in. So based on municipal modernization, we have to come back here and ask town meeting to appropriate those premiums to be used for these future projects. And there's a table, at the suggestion of the select board, we included a table that shows what generated the funds and where they're going.
And just to underscore what the finance director just said, this is not an article that we'll see moving forward, but when the state passed the Municipal Modernization Act, It enabled us to, we have started adding language to our authorizations so that when we receive premiums, we can use that to reduce the size of the debt issuance. But because these issuances predate the new language, we have to go through this process to reallocate to reduce the amount that we're borrowing by the same amount.
Mike?
So I think I understand the premium component on it, but on the first one with the proceeds, see if I got this right. So in essence, we borrowed $20 million. We spent 19.6. We've already paid it off. Where has that money been for the last 15, 18 years or whatever, how long that bond has been running?
So it's related to a 2014 bond sale.
Yeah.
And the funds have been in the high school capital account for
Okay.
that period.
And so that in essence, if we didn't do what we're doing now, that money would simply sit there and not be utilized for anything. Is that
It would sit there and bond council would not be happy.
right? Okay. Thank you.
Paul?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mike?
Put an extra R in bond proceeds and premiums to be appropriated.
Thank you.
And I guess I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
I was just trying to find out where Mike Daly was just pointing to.
It's a big word.
It's in the box.
Yeah, the gray box.
Shaded box.
Oh, got it. Because up above, it's in like 3 or 4 places, and my eyes were not moving quickly enough. So we're taking this money that is otherwise sitting somewhere, and we're now going to apply that money towards these various newer projects that we have going on.
Not new projects in most of those cases.
For most of them, they're the existing project. So essentially, the next time we would have went out to borrow for the Smith School, if we needed, say, $10 million, now we'll need $9 million and $600,000.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 28.
Article 28, I was tasked with the unenviable job of trying to explain this at our last session. Thankfully, we're joined tonight by Clint Allen, our Assistant Utility Director, and I will allow him to explain the rubber glove legislation that we are pursuing in Boston.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. So essentially, Article 28, the home rule petition for Danvers Electric, this would allow our line workers to rubber glove our highest voltage classification that we use in town. So currently, and I know Mike and Eric being on the MLB probably already know this, but we have 2 voltage levels in town that we operate our grid at. We have a 5,000 and we have a 23,000. So according to MGL 149, live line workers are not allowed to rubber glove any voltage higher than 15,500. However, our linemen and our line workers find that there are situations where, using a hot stick, like a 10-foot fiberglass stick, can be a safety hindrance, versus if they were allowed to have the properly 35,000 volt rated equipment and able to actually manipulate the wires and apparatus live. So, there's been a couple other municipalities. Peabody has passed similar legislation. There's only a handful of light plants that operate at a voltage higher than 15,500, so this would apply to. So essentially, our line workers would seek the approval for this in order to improve the safety of their work environment. So happy to take any questions.
Sally?
Wow. I don't have any questions, but I'm just amazed to think anybody'd want to go anywhere near them. So, anyway, more heroes. Thanks.
Eric?
Just appreciate all the work that the line workers do. I have no questions.
Mike?
I'll pass this along to the Wichita lineman. All set. Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, I was curious, and I understand that the line workers are in favor of this. Are we basically, I don't know how to otherwise put it, but going against what the state requires? This is going to be a change. We're allowed to do this. We're not at liability at all.
No, so the investor-owned utilities and a number of private contractors, they're allowed to do this type of work using that type of equipment. As I mentioned previously, 2006 Peabody, whose system was mostly 23,000 volt, they saw similar, legislation, and then Littleton Electric Light in 2010, similar, and it's maybe I should be a little bit clear. It's not that now our guys are going to go out and be rubber gloving everything. It's just those situations where they arise, and for safety purposes, they would just like to be allowed to do it.
Okay. Thank you. All set.
Mike?
No, I think that's probably one of the more important things is it's about the flexibility for those line staff to be able to do this under certain circumstances, not necessarily all the time, but there are times as we get probably a broader explanation of it, but it's actually safer for them to do this than it would be for them to use the other devices. So it's really about their safety, and that's why they're in favor of it.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 29 requires no action at this time.
No action tonight.
And if we move to the front of our booklets, we can move into the special town meeting warrant articles.
The home stretch, Article 1, unpaid bills. This is a standing article each year. Typically, the list is much shorter than what you're looking at. What happens here, when a bill from a prior fiscal year is not paid prior to a date certain, state law requires that those bills in towns be approved by town meeting at a subsequent town meeting by a 9/10 vote. What happened last year, we were closing out a year in the midst of a pandemic, and a lot of our smaller vendors either didn't get us the invoices or those invoices got lost in the shuffle. So we are looking at a larger list than normal. And so, again, this requires a 9/10, 90% support at town meeting to be paid, but this is the list that departments have turned into us over the past months.
Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Paul?
All set.
Mike?
No questions.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
Well, I've got a couple. One of them, towards third from the bottom, water support services to Town of Danvers Business Division. Why would that not have been paid on time? I mean, why is that something that was hanging around? I shouldn't say paid on time.
Right.
That's putting a false impression on it. But I just wonder, why is that one of the ones on this list?
So there's not a great answer for that. I think the short answer is it was missed last summer when we were in the midst of sort of navigating things, and so it needs to be cleared up now so that both sides, that both the water utility and the town can close the books.
So this would be part of the expense that we see in the budgets.
Correct.
Where the water department pays for its share of various services provided by the town.
Part of the indirect cost analysis that Rodney and Peter do each year.
The other questions I have are two things higher up on the list, to the Peabody Police from the DPW. What was, I suppose, is that for
Detail work.
police details?
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. As soon as I asked the question, I knew the answer. Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Great. Any questions from the audience?
Move Article 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 2.
Article 2, we have 4 budget transfers that need to be completed so that various departments can close the year without a deficit. I'll briefly work through those. Based on timing of debt, we have a surplus in the debt budget closing out the year. We need to make a $12,500 transfer to the fire operating. That $12,500 was a grant match that we needed mid-year. The fire department, Chief Amaral and Deputy Berry were able to obtain a grant that basically replaced half of our handheld radios, saving us the need to pay for that through the capital account. So this was not a cost that we knew at the beginning of the year. It's a good news story because this 12.5 is the match on a much larger grant, but we need to make that transfer. The second, from police personnel to police operating, this is to cover the cost of the assessment centers that were completed a couple of weeks ago for the ranks of captain and chief. When Pat Ambrose retired late fall and prior to his tragic death, we at that point knew that we were going to have to schedule assessment centers to promote into the role of chief, and then to backfill behind that one of the captains most likely. So this transfer is related to that. Third is a $20,000 transfer from the department head personnel budget to the administrative services budget in this year's budget, and that is to cover the promotion costs for both Jill Summit and Kathy Ellsworth, who became our treasurer collector and our town clerk after Joe Collins retired. So we're using some of the salary savings in the department head budget to cover their promotions, which happened mid-year this year. And then last, the transfer from sewer retained earnings to sewer operating is related to the culvert collapse near the Meadows when the rail trail sank a couple months ago, and Public Works went through an emergency procurement process to make that repair. And this is the sewer-related cost for that project. There was also a portion that was covered through the electric department budget and through the Public Works tax-supported budget. But there were no available funds in sewer, so we have to do a budget transfer for those. And if there are questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Sally?
So it can't be automatically just moved from sewer retained earnings without this vote?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Eric?
No questions.
Mike?
No questions.
Paul?
No questions.
Mike?
Nothing.
Any questions from the audience? Our last article, Article 3. Before we move on to Article 3, I just want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication this year. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll move Article 2.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Again, thank you all for your dedication, and the staff did a wonderful job putting this together. Peter, enjoy your retirement, and we'll see you around town, I hope. And that's it. Article 3.
You know, you're really not the person to say that to see anybody.
Article 3.
Last but not least, our Chapter 90 Public Works funds for road repairs and maintenance. Each year, the MMA and other entities petition the state to increase this authorization from $200 to $300 million, and each year it's set at $200 million. Based on a formula, each town and city is allocated a portion of the Chapter 90 funds. The $889,000 reflected here is the town of Danvers portion. And it's, I would say, one of the things we discussed at the select board meeting last week, indirectly, each time that we accept an additional street as a public way, it has an impact on our Chapter 90 formula. Not significant, but over time, I think Mr. King said at the last meeting, was it 20 miles, 22 miles of roadway we've accepted since we started this program, which is probably 20% of our total road miles at this point. It's not as simple as to divide the road miles by the appropriation, but every time the town meeting allows us to accept an additional road, it does have a positive impact on the Chapter 90 funds that we receive to maintain those roads.
Okay. Mike?
Nope.
All set.
Mike?
No, we'll take it if the state's giving it. Thank you.
Eric?
No questions.
Sally?
I guess the only downside for us is we have to vote on that other article about taking the liability for for some of the work, but I have no problem with this. I'm glad we can accept it.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I'll move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Just one question for information purposes. Are we expected to go to the town meeting?
At this point, no. If that changes, we will let you know. So you once again get the night off.
Thank you.
I will be there.
Well, you have to be there, but I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Bill Clark.